Hi there. It's me, Sandy Shellis, and today I am kind of testing the eCam Live. I'm not going to do too much with it. It has it's new to me. I'm playing with it, but I'm not going to do much with it. I want to just actually go to a Tom Englehardt, I think that's it, article. And I have a lot of time on my mind to read and think. I can't do a lot as I am a bowling ball head on a pool cue neck. And I kind of got some information yesterday from Friday, that it's not good news. And you know, when a doctor says, you have a bad neck, and then doesn't realize that he's the one that made it that way until I pointed it out in several very significant points. Well, you have a lot of time on your hands, and I have been watching videos lately of Tulsi Gabbard, and she resonates with me very much in her anti-war stance. And I found this article today that I thought we might, whoever. Oh, hi, Paul. Paul's joined us. Paul McGinley. Hi. I don't know how to show comments, so haven't learned how to do that yet. So let's just go through this article. And I didn't put it up on my screen. I'm going to use my iPad. It's called American War is Off the Charts. And a little bit about Tom. Tom, he writes, I think he writes in Counterpunch. And he also had the Tom Dispatch back in the early 2000s. He had a lot of pretty cool people writing in that, like Rebecca Solnit and Bill McKibben and Jonathan Shell and Fatima Budo, Nick Tursi, Pepe Escobar, Noam Chomsky. So he's a pretty good writer. This is not long, but to me, I thought it was a good topic for today since I've been watching her, and I have taken an interest in a lot more than just climate change. So let's go. You have to. Because if you want the bigger picture, you really basically have to have an interest in more than just climate change, although everything culminates in the fact that we're killing us ourselves and we're killing the planet. All right, so I'm looking at this thing and I actually don't even know how to tell anything, but it's kind of cool. It's a different screen and I'll learn it. We want you starts. How does that the U.S. military feed at the terror trowel? Here's a statement it might be hard to disagree with. American war is off the charts. Still, I'd like to explain, but I'm nervous about doing so. I know perfectly well that the next word I plan to write will send most of you tumbling elsewhere in a universe in which news is the latest grotesque mass shooting, the craziest tweet from you-know-who, celebrities marching into court over college admission scandals, or even a boy missing for years who suddenly turns up only to morph into a 23-year-old impostor with a criminal record. How can America's wars in distant lands compete with that? Which is why I just can't bring myself to write the next word. So promise me that after you read it, you'll hang in there for just a minute and give me a chance to explain. Okay, here goes. Somalia, a country in the Horn of Africa. It once glued American eyeballs, but that was so last century, right? I mean, there was that best-selling book and that hit Hollywood movie directed by Ridley Scott, Blade Runner Alien, about the disaster early in Bill Clinton's presidency that came to be known as Black Hawk Down, also known as the Battle of Mogadishu. In the age of Donald Trump, wasn't that a million presidencies ago? Honestly, can you even tell me anymore what in the world it was all about? I couldn't have, not without looking it up again. A warlord, starvation, U.S. intervention, 18 dead American soldiers, and hundreds of dead Somalis, but that hardly mattered. In a country that was shattering, President Clinton did, however, pull out those troops and end the disastrous mission. And that was that, right? I mean, lessons learned? Somalia? Africa? What in the world did it all have to do with us? So Washington washed its hands. The whole thing. And now, on a planet of outrageous tweets and murderously angry white men, you probably didn't even notice, but more than 2 years into the era of Donald Trump, a quarter century after that incident, American airstrikes in, Somalia are precipitously on the rise. Last year, 47 strikes aimed at the leaders and fighters of al-Shabaab, an Islamic terror outfit, more than tripled the ones carried out by the Obama administration in 2016, themselves a modest increase from previous years. And in 2019, they're already on pace to double again, while Somali citizens, not that anyone other than Somali citizens notice or cares, they're dying in significant and rising numbers. And with 500 troops back on the ground there and Pentagon estimates that they will remain for at least another 7 years, the U.S. military is increasingly Somalia bound. Congress hasn't uttered a peep on the subject, and few in this country are paying the slightest attention. We are. So consider this. A simple fact of the never-ending global war on terror, as it was once called. The U.S. military just can't get enough of Somalia. And if that isn't off the charts, what is? Maybe it's even worth a future book with a very small print run called not Black Hawk Down 2, but U.S. Down Forever and a Day. And now that I've started on the subject, if you happen to be reading, if you still happen to be reading, which I still happen to be reading, when it comes to the U.S. military, it's not faintly just Somalia. It's all of Africa. After all, this country's military uniquely has a continent-wide Africa Command, ACA, AFRICOM, founded in 2007. As Nick Turse has often written for Tom Dispatch, that command now has its troops, thousands of them. It's planes and other equipment spread across the continent, north to south, east to west, air bases, drone bases, garrisons, outposts, staging areas, you name it. Meanwhile, AFRICOM's outgoing commanding general, Thomas Waldhauser, only recently told Congress why it's bound to be a forever outfit. Because shades of the Cold War, the Ruskies are coming! Russia is also a growing challenge and has taken a more militaristic approach in Africa. And honestly, 600 odd words in, this wasn't meant to be a piece about either Somalia or Africa. It was meant to be about those U.S. wars being off the charts and how the Pentagon now feeds eternally at the terror trough. Al-Shabaab being only a tiny part of the slop it regularly digests. So for the 7 of you still reading, including me still narrating, let me change the subject to something a little more appealingly, to quote a well-known authority, ridiculous. When it comes to American war, a ridiculous war. Maybe you won't be surprised to learn that what I have in mind is the war in Afghanistan, another of Washington's off-the-charts wars. It might even qualify as the original off-the-chart affair if you don't count Vietnam, which could take you back to the Neolithic age of the United States military's infinite wars. Lest you think I only mean the war that began in Afghanistan after the terror attacks of 9/11, think again. I'm talking about the American war in that distant land that started in 1979. The decade-long conflict in which the U.S. supported extreme Islamists, including a young Saudi named Osama bin Laden. They were our guys then, to be to successfully force the Red Army out of Afghanistan. That was in 1989, 30 years ago. And a triumphant Washington promptly took more than a decade-long holiday, while a brutal set of civil wars continued in an already devastated Afghanistan and the Taliban rose to power in most of the country. Then, as in Somalia, having learned their lesson, the wrong one of course, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and crew decided after 9/11 to emulate, well, the Red Army, even though the Soviet Union had imploded a decade earlier and they occupied the Afghan capital, Kabul. For the only great power left on the planet facing a lightly armed extremist group, what could possibly go wrong? 17 and a half years later, Congress has rarely focused on the war, not to end all wars, and there are still 14,000 American troops and the usual set of private contractors there, along with enough U.S. air power to, well, blow up a lot, but not change anything decisively. Of course, the Taliban was long ago sent to hell in a handbasket. Whoops! The Taliban in 2019 is stronger and in control of more territory than at any moment since it was driven from power in November 2001. Staggering billions of American taxpayer dollars have gone into the reconstruction of that land to little effect, while the domestic infrastructure of the United States has begun to crumble without significant new federal investment. Meanwhile, the security forces of the American-backed Afghan government have been taking casualties at a reportedly unsustainable rate. After not paying much attention to all of this for something like a decade and a half, the American people did, however, inadvertently vote into the White House a presidential candidate who had long dissident thoughts about the Afghan war. Typical was this 2012 tweet of his: "Why are we continuing to train these Afghans who then shoot our soldiers in the back? Afghanistan is a complete waste. Time to come home." And it's not a set of thoughts Donald Trump tossed overboard once he entered the Oval Office either. Only the other day, he ludicrously praised the great strides in Afghanistan that the U.S. military and NATO ain't making in an awkward meeting with that alliance's Secretary General, in which he also managed to claim that his father, distinctly from the Bronx, New York, had been born and raised in Germany. He then double-backed. Stop it, kitty. He then double-backed and termed the Afghan war ridiculous and unfortunate. And last December, soon after he announced that he was pulling all U.S. troops out of Syria, on which more in a moment, he essentially demanded that the U.S. military cut its forces in Afghanistan from 14,000 to 7,000 as part of its not root out. That number was assumedly meant to include the 3,000 troops he had been persuaded to add to U.S. forces there in his first year in office. As it happened, however, the Pentagon had its own forward-thinking ideas on how to withdraw from Afghanistan. Having already turned that war into the longest American history war, the High Command was now evidently vying for another awe-inspiring record: the longest withdrawal of American forces from a war zone ever. A 3 to 5 year span of time, which perhaps an initial cut of 7,000 somewhere in the months to come, although I won't hold my breath on the subject. In that way, they were working to produce an American war of at least 21 years. USA! USA! While perhaps also hoping to outlast this president and get one willing to commit to forever war. Forever. Admittedly, the Trump administration has also launched peace talks with the Taliban, and who knows where that might lead sooner or later. Still, when it comes to the ridiculous war, the president continues to belittle, give credit where it's due, It remains robustly, even disastrously, ongoing and off the charts. I'm going to finish this. And none of that compares to Trump's Syrian debacle. In December, the president publicly overruled his advisors and ordered that the 2,000 U.S. troops stationed in that country been withdrawal in 30 days. We have won against ISIS, he said. He declared, and he spit all over Twitter. Our boys, our young women, our men, they're all coming back, and they're coming back now. I think of what followed as the Trump surge, the third of the era. The first, of course, was General David Petraeus' 2007 surge into Iraq with more than 20,000 American troops. Its aim? To turn the disastrous occupation of that country that followed George W. Bush's May 2003 mission accomplished moment into a raging success. Petraeus, in fact, made his reputation on that turnaround of a surge until, of course, it wasn't. And by then, he had moved on. The second surge was President Obama's decision to send more than 30,000 new U.S. troops into Afghanistan in 2009. And of course, you know how that turned out. Now, appropriately enough, we've had an upside-down, inside-out surge in Syria. Honestly, it could have been a Saturday Night Live routine, complete with Alec Baldwin. In response to Trump's withdrawal decision, Secretary of Defense James Mattis promptly resigned and was almost instantly lauded as an all-American hero by Congress and a media in an uproar over the decision. We're talking, of course, about Mad Dog Mattis, the former Marine general who was so classically set of fighting the Taliban. It's a hell of a hoot and it's fun to shoot some people. I'll be right up there with you. I like brawling. And then, in February, as the pressure on the president ramped up, there was the first partial retreat. Think of it as the beginning of a withdrawal from a withdrawal. The news leaked out that in a concession to Pentagon officials, 200 U.S. troops would be left in Syria for a period of time. It only took another day for that number to rise to 400. Then in mid-March, the Wall Street Journal reported that, in reality, 1,000 troops would be left in that country, a figure promptly and definitively denied, factually incorrect, by no less a personage than the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford. By month's end, however, that factually incorrect figure had been confirmed. 1,000 U.S. personnel would indeed remain indefinitely, or at least until the fall of 2020. Where the Trump surge will go from here, we simply don't know, as the subject has largely dropped from the news on the mainstream. One more piece. The president from Ridya? Meanwhile, don't forget the war that, unlike Afghanistan and Syria, Donald Trump may not be able to imagine ending. The only one on which, since 2001, Congress has taken a stand. I'm thinking, of course, about the grim U.S.-backed Saudi and Emirati war in Yemen. As April began, Congress passed a resolution calling on the president to remove United States forces from hostilities in or affecting Yemen within 30 days. Of course, you already know how well such 30-day deadlines work when it comes to American wars. In the single most obvious situation in which a war, or at least American involvement in it, might possibly be ended, in which the president, with the help of Congress, might actually override the national security state's urge to fight on anywhere and everywhere, President Trump may sign the second veto of his term in office and successfully nix the congressional resolution. And if so, you could be surprised. It's obviously the wrong, off-the-charts war for the president from Ridya to end, or have I, like the president himself, gotten confused about which Trump was born where? Oh yes, and talking about learning one's lessons, as well as truly going off the charts. As the 2020 elections approach, watch out. There's one possible American war still to come in the greater Middle East. You know, the one that won't be off the charts? That's bound to turn out well, given the deep pool of experience and reflection on American war that will have preceded it? I'm thinking, of course, about a potential war with Iran, the one the Bush administration's top officials wished for before they bogged down so disastrously in Iraq and Afghanistan. President Trump's foreign policy team, the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, a relic of the Bush years, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo are visibly dying, if that's the right word, for just such a war. And the president who ripped up the Obama administration's Iran nuclear deal recently declared Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terror group and has been threatening Iran ever since. Seems all too open to the war. I thought that was an excellent piece. And I read the whole thing. Hi, guys. I'll take a few comments. Hi, Marcia. As one who made a living in the military-industrial complex, I can tell you they own enough of the Republican Party to assure continuous war. It's true. Thanks for joining me for that reading. I thought it was so good. I really did. And I heard, and it's not easy to do this, but it's a passion. And I always know somebody's going to join me. And I could be alone in the middle of nowhere with these 5 cats and my old man out the door and poof. Hi, John Kelly. War is very profitable business for the U.S. Oh, hell yeah. Psh. Paul says the Afghani targets the Americans were after later became ISIS. Yeah, and the fight continues. Mike Harrigan, you're with us. You said U.S. foreign policy is based both on paranoia and beliefs that it has the divine right to control the world and preserve its own strategic interests and maximize the profits of the military-industrial complex. Pretty much says it all. And then, hey, Foss, he says, Jimmy Carter said the U.S. has been at peace for only 16 of its 242 years of a nation. Who are we? And then Kevin says, Tulsi says she will put a stop to this. Let me tell you something. Oh, Kim joined us. 1/10 Vegematic says of the U.S. military budget would pay for Medicare for all. All good points. Man, why am I so attracted to Tulsi Gabbard's message? I just don't know. I just have this freaking feeling. And I don't like that the establishment, she was the darling, but she gave up to go for Bernie. And, the establishment trashes her, and it really hurts, because she's a really good candidate. And I don't buy the bullshit. And there are those I listen to that... on talk radio, not Tom Hartman, but I'm not going to name her. She doesn't like Tulsi. You can't even mention Tulsi on her station, and that's really pretty messed up. But anyway, I'm not going to go there. I want to thank you guys for coming. It was a good reading. I don't know how this is going to look. I don't know how my internet is. I brought this stupid-ass wireless modem in here and hooked up in here because I wanted to be near the wood stove because it's really damp. And we had snow this morning again, so... it's getting a little tiring, especially since we keep having to heat the greenhouse. Hi, Gemini Dragon. You're with me? Tulsi's awesome. I know. Somewhere in my heart, there's something going on with me and Tulsi Gabbard. Hi, Adam. War always saves the economy at the price of countless innocent lives. Goddamn right. Hey, Chris is with us. Hi, Natural Progressive. Welcome. I'm glad the video looks good. I like this Ecamm Live, and I like that I moved, I can move that little modem box then with me, and maybe I won't look like pixelated woman. Well, you can go back, Gemini, just, lay down and do something, clean the house, cook dinner, and listen to me read it because it was a good reading. It was a really good reading, and I'm going to read more of him. Countercurrent is getting to be one of my favorite little online sites of journalists. So everybody have a great day. I need to go and take care of a couple of things. And it was great to see you. Now I have to figure out how to get out of Ecamm Live and upload this or whatever I have to do. Finish. That's it. Peace, guys.